Hi, my name's Adrian. I'm here today to talk to you about our project proposal for a naturopathic program to help reduce the incidence of adolescent depression in the Geelong community. Depression is a really important issue for not just Australia but the whole world. There's over 300 million people that are estimated to suffer from depression globally, and that equates to around about 1.3 million Australians who have been diagnosed with depression. Depression is also the single biggest contributor to global disability, and it is also the major contributing factor to suicide. Aside from the health burden that this places on the world and the Australian population, there's also a large financial burden. It's estimated that to deal with this issue, the Australian government puts in excess of $4.7 billion a year through its various funding programs to try and tackle the issue of depression. So that can come through to prescribed subsidies for prescribed medications, subsidies for general practitioner mental health treatment plans, organisations such as Headspace, etc., to help deal with this issue of depression. So it's a massive issue for our nation, but not just in the overall population, but particularly in the adolescent population. And really what we're talking about here is the issue to do with suicide. So what's basically found is, as I said before, depression is the largest contributor to suicide, and youth suicide rates are huge. Suicide is the #1 killer of Australian young people. And as you can see from the graph, the earlier on in life, the more likely we are to commit suicide. So it's a massive issue in terms of life expectancy, and something that this country really needs to deal with, and the government recognises. And they have in fact launched a national mental health strategy aimed at adolescents to try and better tackle mental health issues, and particularly depression. A lot of the contributing factors in the research now that's coming out on depression, it's got to do with dietary and lifestyle factors. So there's been a lot of studies looking at the relationship between a poor quality diet and diets not meeting the Australian standard guidelines for nutrition, also to do with lifestyle issues such as not spending enough time in nature, etc., too much time on the screens, and to do with a lack of exercise. So we're not meeting those targets, and that's being specifically linked to depression. Now, particularly in the Geelong community, that's very relevant. There's been a lot of research that's done. About 50% of the population in Geelong were not meeting their targets for fruit and vegetable intake, and about a third of the population were not meeting their targets for exercise. So it's a massive issue for the local community. So what we're designing is a project that's aimed at addressing this issue in the Geelong adolescent population, adolescents aged between 11 and 17. What we're proposing is that we're looking for 100 subjects, 100 adolescents to be recruited via existing GP clinics in Geelong, and the GP will basically make an assessment of that patient through various questionnaires and ratings to make sure they have clinically diagnosed depression, and to assess their suitability for this program. And obviously parental approval will need to be obtained as well, and if that's the case, then that patient is then given to, there's 2 clinics that we're aiming to have run this, naturopathic clinics that we're aiming to have run this program in Geelong, and then the patients are referred to the naturopath, and the naturopath will then evaluate the patient in terms of their diet, those dietary and lifestyle factors, and use those naturopathic interventions to help correct those things. So naturopaths are very highly skilled in dietary analysis and lifestyle analysis, and using their certain tools and techniques will be able to either prescribe certain dietary modifications, specific nutrient supplementation, some stress reduction techniques, spending more time in nature, exercise recommendations, etc., to help this patient deal with depression. So on a regular basis, the patients will check in with a naturopath, but also with a general practitioner as well, so that they're accurately monitored and assessed for a duration of 6 months. Now, at the end of that 6 months, what we're proposing then is that data is pooled and collated, so it can be assessed for significance statistically, and that will be done through Deakin University Food and Mood Centre. So that will be done by them and processed and compiled into a report. That report will then be provided to obviously the patients, but also to the National Commission on Adolescent Mental Health, who will then analyse that data, and if it's statistically significant that there's been shown to be an improvement in depression symptoms and remission of depression as well, then that can be then rolled through into a multi-centre program through various cities in Australia, and then that can be done for another 6 months, and if that's proved to be successful, then we're hopeful that program can then be rolled out right around the country. So the idea of this program is that we test it in Geelong in a small population, it's proven to be successful, roll that out right through the country so that we can dramatically tackle this issue of depression in adolescents and prevent youth suicide. So thanks very much for listening.